The dust storm hit Redemption Creek just as the sun began its descent behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies. It came rolling across the plains like a brown avalanche, swallowing everything in its path: the ramshackle buildings, the hitching posts, the drunks sprawled outside Morrison's saloon. By the time it reached the edge of town, where the Arkansas River cut through the landscape like a muddy scar, visibility had dropped to near nothing. Ethan Cole pulled his bandana up over his nose and squinted through the haze. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Duchess, snorted in protest but kept moving forward at his gentle urging. They'd been riding hard for 3 days, putting distance between themselves and whatever trouble lay behind them in Colorado territory. Redemption Creek wasn't much, barely a speck on most maps, but it had 2 things Ethan needed: anonymity and whiskey. The storm began to settle as quickly as it had risen, leaving a fine coating of grit on everything. Through the clearing air, Ethan could make out the town's main street, a double row of weathered buildings facing each other across a dirt road wide enough for 2 wagons to pass. Morrison's saloon dominated one side, its false front proclaiming "Finest Spirits West of the Mississippi" in peeling red paint. Across from it stood Henley's General Store, the Redemption Creek Bank and Trust, and a modest church with a crooked steeple. Ethan guided Duchess to the saloon's hitching post, dismounted with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent more nights in the saddle than in beds, and brushed the worst of the dust from his coat. The weight of the Colt .45 on his hip was a familiar comfort, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. He'd had enough of gunplay to last several lifetimes. The saloon's bat-wing doors creaked as he pushed through them. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled beer. A dozen men occupied various tables, most focused on cards or bottles. A few glanced up at the newcomer, their eyes taking in his weathered face, the gun belt, the way he moved, careful, alert, dangerous. They quickly returned to their drinks. "Whiskey," Ethan told the bartender, a mountain of a man with arms like ham hocks and a magnificent handlebar mustache. "That'll be 2 bits, the bartender said, already reaching for a bottle. "You passing through or staying?" "Haven't decided yet." Ethan placed his coins on the scarred wood and took his drink to a corner table where he could watch both the door and the room. He'd barely settled in when the commotion started. "Come on, church mouse, just 1 drink," a man's voice, slurred with alcohol, carried across the saloon. "Pretty little thing like you shouldn't be so high and mighty." Ethan looked up to see 3 cowboys surrounding a young woman near the door. She clutched a basket of laundry to her chest like a shield, her chin raised despite the fear evident in her wide eyes. Even from across the room, Ethan could see she was young, maybe 19 or 20, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun and a faded blue dress that had been mended multiple times. "Please, Mr. Hawkins," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. "I need to deliver these clothes and get home before dark." The man called Hawkins tall, lean, with the cruel mouth of someone who enjoyed causing pain, reached out and grabbed her arm. "Now don't be unfriendly. Mary Louise, your daddy ain't around to preach at us no more. Is he?" The girl, Mary Louise, tried to pull away, but Hawkins held firm. His companions laughed, enjoying the show. The other patrons studiously ignored the scene, not wanting to get involved. Ethan sighed into his whiskey. He'd promised himself no more trouble, no more playing hero, no more getting tangled in other people's problems. But something about the girl's dignity in the face of harassment, the way she held herself despite being outnumbered and afraid, stirred something he'd thought long dead. The lady said no. His voice cut through the laughter like a blade. The saloon went quiet. Hawkins turned, still gripping Mary Louise's arm, and fixed Ethan with a look that had probably intimidated plenty of men. "This ain't your business, stranger. Best you keep drinking and forget what you think you saw." Ethan stood slowly, his hand hovering near but not touching his gun. Years of experience had taught him that the threat of violence was often more effective than violence itself. "I'm making it my business. Let her go." Hawkins released Mary Louise with a shove that sent her stumbling. She caught herself against a table, her laundry basket spilling shirts and undergarments across the dirty floor. Red-faced with embarrassment, she knelt to gather them up. "You just made a big mistake, mister," Hawkins said, his hand dropping to his own gun. "You know who I am." "Don't know. Don't care." Ethan kept his voice level, almost bored. "But I know what you are. Seen plenty like you big men when they're picking on women and outnumbering folks. Take away those advantages, and you're just another drunk with a loud mouth." Hawkins's face flushed dark red. His companions spread out, trying to flank Ethan. The other patrons began edging toward the walls, sensing violence in the air like animals before a storm. 3 against 1. Ethan observed. "About what I'd expect from yellow bellies like you." "You son of a—" Hawkins went for his gun. Ethan's Colt cleared leather before Hawkins's fingers even touched his grip. The sound of the hammer clicking back was loud in the tense silence. Ethan held the gun steady, aimed at Hawkins's chest. "Slow down there, friend," Ethan said calmly. "This doesn't have to end with blood on the floor. You boys can walk out of here, let the lady go about her business, and we can all get back to drinking. Or—" He let the alternative hang unspoken. Hawkins' companions had frozen, hands halfway to their weapons. They looked to their leader, waiting for a cue. Sweat beaded on Hawkins's forehead despite the evening cool. "This ain't over," he finally spat, slowly raising his hands. "You can't stay awake forever. Stranger, and little Mary Louise here won't always have her guardian angel around." "Then I guess I'll have to stick around for a while," Ethan replied. "Make sure she does." Hawkins jerked his head at his companions, and they filed out of the saloon, throwing dark looks back at Ethan. Only when the doors stopped swinging did Ethan holster his weapon. Mary Louise had finished gathering her scattered laundry. She stood, clutching the basket, and looked at Ethan with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. Up close, he could see her eyes were green as spring grass, with gold flecks that caught the lamplight. "Thank you," she said simply. "You didn't have to do that." "Seemed like you could use a hand," Ethan replied. He bent down and picked up a shirt she'd missed, handing it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she pulled back as if burned. "I should go," she said quickly. "Mrs. Patterson is expecting her laundry." "I'll walk you," Ethan offered. "That's not necessary. Those boys might be waiting outside. Let me at least see you safe to wherever you're going." She hesitated, then nodded. They left the saloon together. Stepping into the deepening twilight, the dust storm had passed completely, leaving the air clear and cool. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I'm Mary Louise Walker," she said as they walked. "My father was Reverend Walker. He passed last winter." "Ethan Cole," he replied. "Sorry about your father." "He was a good man, too good for this place. Maybe—" She shifted the laundry basket to her other hip. "You're new in town." "Just rode in." Running from something or running to something. The question surprised him with its directness. Maybe both, maybe neither. Sometimes a man just needs to keep moving. They walked in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "Mr. Hawkins and his friends, they've been getting bolder since Father died. Sheriff Benson doesn't do much about it. Says boys will be boys. Sheriff sounds like he needs a new line of work." Mary Louise gave a bitter laugh. "Sheriff Benson has his own interests in mind, not the town's, but people are too scared or too tired to do anything about it." They'd reached a small, neat house on the edge of town. Lamplight glowed warmly through clean windows. Mary Louise set down her basket on the porch and turned to face him. "Thank you again, Mr. Cole. I don't know why you intervened, but I'm grateful." "Just Ethan," he said. "And you're welcome." She studied him in the fading light, seeming to weigh something in her mind. You seem like a man who's seen violence, done violence. More than my share. He admitted. Then why help me? You could have just finished your drink and moved on. Ethan considered the question. Why had he stepped in? He'd sworn off playing hero after what happened in Abilene, but watching her stand up to those men, maintaining her dignity even while afraid, had stirred something in him. Sometimes a man gets tired of walking past things that ain't right, he finally said. Sometimes he needs to remember there's still something in him worth a damn. Mary Louise smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face from merely pretty to beautiful. I hope you're planning to stay in town for a while. Ethan Cole. I have a feeling Redemption Creek could use more men who remember that. She picked up her basket and disappeared into the house, leaving Ethan standing in the gathering darkness. He could still leave, he told himself. Get back on Duchess and ride out before Hawkins and his boys decided to make good on their threats. It would be the smart thing to do. Instead, he found himself walking back toward town, looking for a boarding house with a vacant room. The smart thing and the right thing, he was learning, were rarely the same. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from the man he used to be and start figuring out the man he wanted to become. The boarding house sat at the edge of town like an afterthought, a two-story building that leaned slightly to the east as if tired from fighting prairie winds. Mrs. Abigail Fletcher, the proprietor, was a widow with sharp eyes and sharper tongue who sized up Ethan like she was calculating his worth in silver dollars. $4 a week, meals included, she announced, leading him up creaking stairs to a small room under the eaves. No visitors after 9, no drinking in the rooms, no gunplay. You break my rules or my furniture, you're out. The room was sparse but clean, a narrow bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a chipped basin, a single chair, and hooks on the wall for clothes. Through the small window, Ethan could see the Arkansas River glinting in the moonlight, winding its way past town like a silver ribbon. He'd been in Redemption Creek for 3 days now, falling into a routine that felt both foreign and oddly comforting. Mornings he spent at the stable, caring for Duchess and helping old Samuel, the hostler, with odd jobs. Afternoons found him at Morrison's saloon, nursing a single whiskey and playing the occasional hand of cards. He kept to himself mostly, but watched and listened, learning the rhythms of the town. And he noticed Mary Louise. She seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, a ghost of blue fabric and auburn hair glimpsed at the edges of his vision. He'd see her hurrying down Main Street with her laundry basket, or emerging from Henley's store with a small parcel, or kneeling in the churchyard tending her father's grave. She moved through town like she was trying not to take up space, to pass unnoticed. But Ethan found his eyes drawn to her nonetheless. The fourth morning dawned clear and cool, with a crispness that promised autumn's approach. Ethan rose early, splashed water on his face, and headed out for his morning walk along the river. It had become his favorite time of day, when the town was still quiet and a man could think without the noise of human complications. He followed a worn path that led downstream, away from town. The river here was wider, flowing around sandbars and through stands of cottonwood and willow. Birds called from the branches, and somewhere a beaver slapped its tail against the water. That's when he saw her. Mary Louise knelt at the river's edge, scrubbing clothes against a flat rock. She'd hiked her skirts up to keep them from the water, revealing worn boots and carefully darned stockings. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, and she'd removed her bonnet, letting her hair fall loose around her shoulders as she worked. She was humming a hymn, he thought, though he couldn't place it. The morning sun caught the auburn in her hair, turning it to flame, and painted gold highlights on the water droplets that flew from the fabric as she scrubbed. Ethan stopped, knowing he should announce himself or turn back, but found himself frozen by the simple beauty of the scene. There was something about watching her work, unguarded and unaware, that made his chest tight. She looked younger without the careful mask she wore in town, more vulnerable but also more real. A twig snapped under his boot, and her head shot up like a startled deer. Their eyes met across the distance, and he saw her face flush pink. Mr. Cole," she scrambled to her feet, pushing her skirts down and trying to smooth her loose hair. I wasn't expecting—" "Just Ethan, remember?" He moved closer, keeping his movement slow and unthreatening. "I'm sorry. Didn't mean to startle you. I was just out for a walk. I come here early," she said, still flustered. "Before the town wakes up. It's peaceful, and the water runs cleaner here than closer to town." "Smart thinking." He gestured to the pile of clothes. "That's a lot of washing for one person." "I take in laundry," she explained, some of her composure returning. "It's honest work, and it keeps me fed. Not everyone in town approves, but—" She shrugged, a gesture that said more than words about what she thought of town opinions. "Mind if I sit a spell?" Ethan asked. "Promise I won't get in your way." She hesitated, then nodded. "If you like. Though I warn you, watching someone wash clothes isn't exactly thrilling entertainment." He found a comfortable rock and settled himself, pulling out his tobacco pouch. "You'd be surprised what a man finds entertaining after weeks on the trail. Sometimes just watching the river is enough." She returned to her work, though he noticed she kept glancing at him, as if trying to figure him out. They stayed that way for a while, her washing and him smoking, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. "You're different from the other men in town," she said finally, wringing out a shirt with practiced efficiency. "How's that?" "You're quiet. Most men here seem to need to fill every silence with words, usually about themselves. But you seem content just to be—" "Words are like bullets," Ethan said. "Best not to waste them." She looked at him sharply. "Is that what you were, a gunfighter?" "Among other things." He flicked ash into the river. "None of them worth talking about on a morning this fine. You're running from something." It wasn't a question. "We're all running from something, Miss Walker. Some of us are just more honest about it." She considered this as she laid the clean shirt on a flat rock to dry. "I'm not running. This is my home. My father is buried here. I have nowhere else to go." "That's a kind of trap, too." "Perhaps." She moved to the next garment, a woman's petticoat that she handled with careful attention. "But at least it's a trap I chose." They fell silent again. Ethan found himself watching her hands as she worked small but strong, reddened from the harsh soap and cold water. Working hands. Honest hands. He thought of his own hands, of all the things they'd done, and had to look away. "Why do you come to the river?" she asked suddenly. "You could hire someone to clean your clothes. Mrs. Fletcher probably offers the service." "Not for washing," he said. "Just to walk. Think. Rivers have always calmed me, ever since I was a boy in Missouri. Something about water always moving, always changing, but the river itself staying the same. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept," Mary Louise quoted softly. "My father loved that psalm. He said rivers were God's way of showing us that we could be constant and changing at the same time." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was too wise for this place. Maybe he believed everyone could be saved, could be better than they were. It killed him in the end, trying to save souls that didn't want saving." "How did he die?" Ethan asked gently. Mary Louise's hands stilled in the water. "Pneumonia, officially. But really, I think he died of a broken heart. He came here full of hope, wanting to bring God's word to the frontier. But the town, it wore him down. The drinking, the fighting, the casual cruelties. And when he spoke out against Sheriff Benson's corruption, against the way certain men treated the saloon girls, against the cheating at the card tables, well, suddenly nobody needed their souls saved anymore." "I'm sorry?" He never lost faith, though, even at the end, burning with fever, He made me promise to stay, to be a light in the darkness. She laughed bitterly. Some light I am, washing other people's dirty clothes and hiding from drunk cowboys. You stood up to Hawkins and his boys, and needed rescuing like some fairy tale princess. The bitterness in her voice was sharp. Nothing wrong with needing help sometimes, Ethan said. And you weren't cowering. You were standing your ground best you could. That takes courage. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt exposed under her gaze. What are you really doing here, Ethan Cole? And like you don't just drift into towns like Redemption Creek without reason. He stubbed out his cigarette and stood, dusting off his pants. Maybe I'm looking for redemption. Seems like the right place for it, given the name. Redemption isn't found in a place, she said. It's found in choices, in choosing to be better than you were yesterday. Then maybe I'm trying to make better choices. She stood as well, gathering her washing into baskets. The sun had climbed higher, and the town would be stirring soon. I should get back, Mrs. Patterson likes her laundry delivered before noon. Let me help you carry those. People will talk. People are already talking. Might as well give them something true to gossip about. She smiled at that, the first real smile he'd seen from her since that first night. All right then, but just to the edge of town. I won't have you seen at my door in daylight. I have to maintain some respectability. They walked back together, him carrying the heavier basket, her clutching the lighter one. The morning had warmed, and insects buzzed in the grass. As they neared town, Ethan could see smoke rising from chimneys, hear the sound of hammering from the blacksmith's shop. Same time tomorrow, he asked as they prepared to part ways. She looked scandalized. Mr. Cole, are you suggesting we make a habit of meeting unchaperoned by the river? I'm suggesting that a man who takes morning walks and a woman who does her washing might happen to be at the same place at the same time. Nothing planned about it. Nothing planned at all, she agreed, but her eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. Though I should warn you, tomorrow I'll be washing Mr. Henley's long underwear. Not exactly the romantic riverside scene you might be imagining. Romance. Miss Walker. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I'm just interested in the philosophical discussions. Very educational, talking about redemption and choices and such. Of course, very educational. She took her basket from him, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Good day, Mr. Cole. Good day, Miss Walker. He watched her walk away, back straight, head high, and realized he was in trouble. He'd come to Redemption Creek to hide, to lick his wounds and figure out his next move. He hadn't planned on Mary Louise Walker with her green eyes and work-worn hands, and stubborn faith in the possibility of being better. But then, Ethan reflected as he headed back to his boarding house, the best and worst things in life were usually the ones you didn't plan for. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. The morning mist rose from the Arkansas River like spirits fleeing the dawn, twisting and dissipating as the first rays of sunlight touched the water. Ethan had been walking this path for 2 weeks now, and each morning brought the same anticipation would she be there. Today, he arrived earlier than usual, unable to sleep past the first hint of gray in the eastern sky. The familiar sound of water against stone drew him forward, but something was different. He could hear splashing, irregular and urgent, followed by a gasp. Through the willows, he saw her. Mary Louise stood knee-deep in the river, reaching for something, a piece of white fabric that the current had caught, carrying it away from the flat rocks where she did her washing. She lunged forward, lost her footing on the slippery riverbed, and went down with a splash and a cry of dismay. Ethan didn't think. He crashed through the brush and into the water, reaching her just as she struggled to her feet, soaked and sputtering. Her hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and her dress clung to her form in a way that made him suddenly aware of how young and vulnerable she was. Are you hurt? He steadied her with hands on her shoulders, trying not to notice how she trembled under his touch. The sheet, she gasped, pointing downstream. Mrs. Morrison's best sheet if I lose it. Without releasing her, Ethan spotted the white fabric caught on a branch a dozen yards downstream. Stay here, he commanded, but she shook her head. I can get it. You're shaking like a leaf. His voice came out rougher than intended. Let me. He waded deeper, the current tugging at his legs. The sheet had wrapped around a dead branch, and he managed to free it just before the river could claim it completely. When he turned back, Mary Louise stood where he'd left her, arms wrapped around herself, watching him with wide eyes. The morning sun backlighted her, turning the wet fabric of her dress translucent, outlining the gentle curves beneath. Her face was flushed. Whether from cold or embarrassment, he couldn't tell. Water droplets clung to her eyelashes like tears. Here, he said, holding out the sheet, trying to keep his voice steady. No harm done. She reached for it, and their hands met over the wet fabric. For a moment, neither moved. The river flowed around them. Birds called from the trees, and something shifted in the air between them, something that had been building since that first night at the saloon. Your hands, she whispered, looking down at where they touched. They're scarred. He started to pull away, but she held on, turning his hand palm up. Thin white lines crisscrossed his palms and fingers, along with the calluses from years of handling guns and reins. Bar fight and dodge, he said, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. Man pulled a knife. I was too slow. No, she said softly, tracing one particularly deep scar with her fingertip. You weren't too slow. You just didn't want to kill him. He looked at her sharply. How could you know that? Because I've watched you these past weeks. How you handle your gun, how you move. A man that's skilled doesn't get cut by some drunk with a knife unless he chooses to. She lifted her eyes to his. You took the blade rather than take a life. Sometimes, Ethan said slowly. Taking a life is easier than living with what you've done. The confession hung between them. Mary Louise still held his hand, the sheet forgotten, dripping between them. Her thumb moved across his palm, and he shivered not from the cold water but from the gentleness of the touch. You're not what you pretend to be, she said. Neither are you. His free hand rose almost of its own accord, pushing a wet strand of hair from her face. The preacher's daughter who keeps to herself, does her washing, causes no trouble. But I see the fire in you, the way you bite your tongue when the respectable ladies snub you in the street, the way your eyes flash when you hear about some injustice. Fire only burns things down, she said, but she leaned into his touch. Or forges them into something stronger. They stood frozen, the moment stretching like spun glass. Then a sound from the bank broke the spell horses approaching. Mary Louise jerked back, suddenly aware of their position alone. In the water, her dress clinging inappropriately, his hands on her. Someone's coming, she said, panic creeping into her voice. If they see us like this. Ethan moved swiftly, guiding her behind the screen of willows just as 3 riders appeared on the path. His body shielded hers from view, pressing her back against the muddy bank. He could feel her heart racing against his chest. Or maybe that was his own. The riders passed, laughing about something, never glancing toward the river. But Ethan remained where he was, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Mary Louise's hands rested on his chest, and he could feel the heat of them through his wet shirt. They're gone, she whispered. I know. Neither moved. Her green eyes had gone dark, and her lips parted slightly as her breathing quickened. The proper thing would be to step back, to pretend this moment hadn't happened, but propriety had never been Ethan's strong suit. We should, she began, but he silenced her with a look. Tell me to step back, he said roughly. Tell me this is wrong, and I'll walk away right now. Won't come to the river again, won't cause you any more trouble than I already have. Her hands fisted in his shirt. I should tell you that. I should send you away. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So why can't I? Because maybe you're tired of being good, of being what everyone expects. Maybe you want something just for yourself. Consequences be damned. Is that what you are? She asked. A consequence? Probably. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. Question is, am I one you're willing to face? She rose up on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. For a heartbeat, he thought she might close the distance between them. Then she pressed her palms flat against his chest and pushed gently. Not like this, she said, stepping away. Not because we got caught up in a moment. If I'm going to face consequences, Ethan Cole, I want to choose them with my eyes wide open. He let her go, though every instinct screamed to pull her back. Fair enough. She gathered her washing things with shaking hands. Wringing out the rescued sheet, he helped her in silence, both of them careful not to touch again. When everything was packed, she turned to face him. I need you to understand something, she said. I'm not some frontier maiden looking for a strong man to save her. I've been taking care of myself since my father died. I don't need rescuing. I know that. Do you, because men like you? She stopped, frustration clear on her face. You ride into town. You help because it makes you feel better about whatever you're running from. Then you leave, and we're left to clean up the mess. Is that what you think I'm doing? I don't know. She looked at him helplessly. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that when you look at me, I feel like someone I don't recognize, and that terrifies me. Good, he said. She blinked. Good. Terror keeps you sharp, makes you think before you leap. If you weren't scared, I'd worry you didn't understand what was happening here. And what is happening here? He considered his words carefully. Something neither of us planned for. Something that's going to complicate both our lives if we let it. If, she repeated, so we have a choice. There's always a choice. Question is whether we're brave enough to make it. She shouldered her baskets, chin lifting with determination. I need time to think, to decide what I want. Take all the time you need. Will you still come to the river? Do you want me to? She met his eyes directly. Yes, God help me, yes. Then I'll be here. She nodded and turned to go, then paused. Ethan, what you said about choosing consequences that goes both ways. I'm not a consequence you can walk away from when you get restless. If we do this, if we choose this, I need to know you'll stay. He thought of all the towns he'd left, all the people he'd disappointed, all the promises he'd broken. I can't promise forever. I don't even know what that looks like. But I can promise that I won't leave without warning, won't disappear in the night like a coward. If the time comes when I need to go, I'll tell you why. I suppose that's more honest than most men would be, she said softly. Until tomorrow. Then he watched her walk away, her wet dress leaving dark footprints in the dust. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the mist, and Ethan stood alone by the river, wondering if he'd just made the best or worst decision of his life. The water flowed on, carrying leaves and twigs toward some distant sea, indifferent to human complications. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt the current pulling him somewhere specific, not away from his past, but toward a future he couldn't quite see yet. Tomorrow, he thought, tomorrow they would meet again by the river, and perhaps the shape of that future would become clearer, or perhaps it would all fall apart. Another casualty of the harsh realities of frontier life. Either way, he would be there, because Mary Louise Walker, with her green eyes and work-worn hands and stubborn faith, had asked him to, and somehow that was enough. The whispers started small, like smoke seeping under doors. Mrs. Fletcher mentioned it first. Her lips pursed as she served Ethan his morning coffee. People are talking, she said, setting the cup down harder than necessary. About you and the Walker girl. Ethan kept his expression neutral. People in small towns always talk. It's their primary entertainment. This is different. She leaned in, her voice dropping. "That Hawkins fellow's been spreading stories. Says he's seen you two meeting by the river, alone, at ungodly hours." "Miss Walker does her washing early. I take walks. Sometimes we exchange pleasantries. Nothing ungodly about it." "Mrs." Fletcher sniffed. "A young woman's reputation is like fine china. Mr. Cole. Once cracked, it can never be made whole again." The warning stayed with Ethan as he made his way to Morrison's saloon that afternoon. The usual crowd was there, but conversations died when he entered. Eyes followed him to his corner table, and whispers resumed in his wake. Sheriff Carl Benson sat at the bar, a man who wore his badge like a license for laziness. He was broad through the middle, with thinning hair and eyes like a snake's, cold and calculating. As Ethan settled with his whiskey, the sheriff hauled himself off his stool and ambled over. "Mind if I join you?" Benson didn't wait for an answer, dropping into the opposite chair with a grunt. "Ethan Cole. Isn't it been meaning to introduce myself properly?" "Sheriff." Ethan nodded but didn't extend his hand. "You've been in my town. 3 weeks now, man has to wonder what keeps a fellow like you in a place like Redemption Creek. Clean air, friendly people, good whiskey." Ethan took a deliberate sip. "Man could do worse." Benson chuckled, a sound like gravel in a pan. "Friendly people, yes, good Christian folks, most of them. They look after their own, protect what's theirs." His eyes hardened. "And they don't take kindly to outsiders causing trouble." "Haven't caused any trouble." "That's a matter of perspective. See, we had a nice balance here before you showed up. Everyone knew their place, stayed in their lane. Now I got Hawkins breathing down my neck about some altercation, and worse." He leaned forward. "I got concerns about the virtue of one of our young ladies." "Miss Walker's virtue is no concern of mine or yours. Everything in this town is my concern." Benson's voice carried an edge now. "Especially Mary Louise Walker. Girl's had a hard enough time since her daddy passed. Doesn't need some drifter filling her head with notions." "What kind of notions would those be?" "The kind that make a good girl forget her place, make her think she's too good for the opportunities this town provides." The sheriff's smile was oily. "I've been patient, out of respect for her late father. But patience has limits." Ethan set down his glass carefully. "Are you threatening Miss Walker?" "Threatening? No, I'm looking out for her interests. A young woman alone, trying to make her way. It's dangerous. All sorts of accidents could happen. Why, just last month, Widow Perkins's house caught fire. Tragic. Nothing left but ashes." Benson stood, adjusting his gun belt. "You seem like a smart man. Cole, smart enough to know when he's outstayed his welcome." The sheriff left, and gradually the saloon returned to its normal buzz. But Ethan noticed the glances, the way men shifted when he looked their direction. The town was choosing sides, and he was on the losing one. That evening, he found Mary Louise at the church, kneeling in the front pew. The building was simple. Whitewashed wood with a cross made from railroad ties. Evening light filtered through plain glass windows, casting long shadows. She didn't look up when he entered, but her shoulders tensed. "You shouldn't be here." "Needed to talk to you." He slid into the pew beside her. "Sheriff paid me a visit today." "I know. Mrs. Huggins made sure to tell me all about it, right after she told me I was following in my mother's footsteps." Her laugh was bitter. "My mother died when I was 3, of fever. But according to the town gossips, she was obviously a woman of loose morals." "Martha Huggins is a dried-up old biddy with nothing better to do than spread poison." "She's also the banker's sister-in-law. Her words carry weight." Mary Louise finally looked at him, and he saw tears had traced paths down her cheeks. "They're saying I've been meeting you for improper purposes, that I'm no better than the girls at the saloon." "Let them talk. We know the truth." "The truth doesn't matter." The words burst out of her. "Don't you understand? The truth is what the town decides it is. And once they decide you're ruined, you are. Ethan reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Don't, someone might see. So that's it. We let them win, stop talking, stop meeting, pretend there's nothing between us. What is between us, Ethan? She turned to face him fully. Really, you're a man passing through. I'm a woman trapped here. What future could we possibly have? I don't know, he admitted. But I know I can't stand the thought of you facing this alone. The sheriff made threats today. Veiled, but clear enough. Her face paled. What kind of threats? The kind that involve accidents, fires, things that happen to people who don't fall in line. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, he wants me to marry him. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Benson. He's been circling since father died. Says a young woman needs protection, guidance. Says he could give me a good life, respectable position as the sheriff's wife. Her voice dripped disgust. Never mind that he's 30 years older and corrupt as sin. You said no. Of course I said no. But he's not a man who accepts rejection well. And now, with these rumors, she twisted her hands in her lap. He'll use them as leverage, marry him and be respectable again, or remain the fallen woman who consorts with drifters. Rage, hot and familiar, rose in Ethan's chest. His hand moved instinctively toward his gun before he caught himself. There has to be another way. What way you'll challenge him to a duel, shoot it out in the street like some dime novel? She shook her head. This isn't a problem you can solve with a gun. Ethan, this is how the world works. Men like Benson take what they want, and women like me try to survive it. Not while I'm here. And how long will that be? The question hung between them like a blade. A month, too. Until you get restless or bored or remember whatever you're running from. He wanted to deny it, to swear he'd stay forever. But the words stuck in his throat. How many times had he made promises he couldn't keep? Mary Louise saw his hesitation and nodded, unsurprised but clearly hurt. That's what I thought. You're a good man, Ethan Cole, better than you think you are. But you're not a staying man, and I can't build a life on someone who has one foot out the door. I'm trying to change. I know. She reached out then, touching his face gently. And maybe you will, but I can't wait to find out. I have to survive here. Now. Today. So what will you do? I don't know. Pray, work, endure. Same as always. She stood, smoothing her skirts. I should go. Being seen here together will only make things worse. Mary Louise. No. She held up a hand. Please, just let me go. Let me think. This isn't your problem to solve. She walked out, leaving him alone in the empty church. The shadows had grown long, and the cross threw a dark bar across the floor. Ethan sat in the silence, wrestling with choices and consequences. Outside, he could hear the town coming alive for the evening. Piano music from the saloon, laughter from the street, a dog barking somewhere. Normal sounds of normal life. But underneath them, he sensed the current of menace that flowed through Redemption Creek like poison. He thought about Sheriff Benson's oily smile, about Hawkins and his crew, about all the ways they could hurt Mary Louise while staying within the twisted bounds of frontier law. His hands clenched into fists. Maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't a problem he could solve with a gun. But that didn't mean he was going to stand by and watch her be destroyed by small-minded people and their petty cruelties. Rising from the pew, Ethan made his decision. If the town wanted to paint him as the villain in their morality play, he'd give them what they expected. But he'd do it his way, on his terms. And Sheriff Carl Benson would learn that threatening Mary Louise Walker was the worst mistake he'd ever made. The storm rolled in from the west 3 days after their conversation in the church, bringing sheets of rain that turned the streets to mud and drove everyone indoors. Ethan stood at the window of his boarding house room, watching lightning illuminate the landscape in stark, brief moments of clarity. He hadn't seen Mary Louise since that evening. She'd stopped coming to the river, and when he'd glimpsed her in town, she'd turned away. The message was clear. She was trying to protect them both by maintaining distance. But distance hadn't stopped the harassment. Through the saloon gossip, Ethan learned that someone had thrown rocks through her window. Her wash lines had been cut twice, sending clean laundry into the mud. And Sheriff Benson had taken to checking on her with increasing frequency. A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. Mrs. Fletcher stood in the hallway, rain dripping from her shawl. Her usually stern face creased with worry. "She's gone," she said without preamble. "Who's gone?" "Don't play stupid. Mr. Cole, the Walker girl. Her landlord went to collect rent this morning and found her room empty. Cleared out in the night. Looks like..." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Did she leave word a note?" "Nothing, but that's not the worst of it." Mrs. Fletcher glanced down the hallway nervously. "Word is Sheriff Benson's put together a search party. Says she stole money from him. Can you imagine that girl never took a penny that wasn't earned honest?" Where would she go? Ethan was already reaching for his coat and gun belt. "In this storm, there's an old trapper's cabin about 5 miles upriver. Her father used to take her there sometimes. For prayer retreats. If she's trying to hide..." She didn't need to finish. 5 miles in this weather would be dangerous for anyone, let alone a young woman on foot. "Thank you," Ethan said, checking his Colt and grabbing extra ammunition. "Mr. Cole." Mrs. Fletcher caught his arm. "I haven't always been kind about you and her, but that girl deserves better than what this town's given her. You bring her back safe." Ethan nodded and headed for the stairs. Outside, the rain hit like fists, cold and brutal. He made his way to the stable, where old Samuel was trying to calm the nervous horses. "Hell of a night to be riding," Samuel said as Ethan saddled Duchess. "No choice. The sheriff's boys left about an hour ago. Took the main road north." Samuel's eyes were knowing. "Course, if someone knew about the old deer trail that follows the river, they might make better time. Might even get there first." "Might they?" Ethan swung into the saddle. "They might, assuming they were careful. That trail's treacherous in the rain. One wrong step." He shook his head. "But a man who knew what he was doing, a man with something worth protecting, he might risk it." Ethan touched his hat brim in thanks and rode out into the storm. The deer trail was barely visible even in good weather. Now, with the rain turning it to a river of mud and darkness pressing close. It was like riding through a nightmare. Duchess picked her way carefully, trusting Ethan's guidance as he trusted her sure footing. Lightning split the sky, giving him glimpses of the swollen river below. One mistake, one slip, and they'd both be swept away. But he pushed on, driven by an urgency he couldn't name, or didn't want to. It took 2 hours to cover what should have been 5 miles. By the time he spotted the cabin, a dark smudge against the hillside. His clothes were soaked through and his hands were numb with cold. No smoke rose from the chimney, but fresh footprints in the mud told him someone had been here recently. He dismounted, drawing his gun out of habit more than expectation of danger. Mary Louise. He pushed open the door carefully. She sat huddled in the corner, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, her traveling bag beside her. When she saw him, her face crumpled. "How did you find me?" "Mrs. Fletcher." She was worried. He holstered his gun and crossed to her, kneeling down. "What were you thinking, running off like this?" "I was thinking I couldn't stay." Her voice was hollow. "Benson came to my room last night, said if I didn't agree to marry him by week's end, he'd have me arrested for theft and moral corruption. Said he had witnesses who'd swear to whatever he needed them to." "So you ran." "What else could I do?" The words came out as a sob. "Fight him, with what I have no money, no family, no power. All I could do was run." Ethan pulled her against him, feeling her shake with cold and fear. You could have come to me. And brought his anger down on you too. No, you've done enough. Too much. She pulled back, looking at him with red-rimmed eyes. You should leave. He'll be here soon. If he finds you with me. Let him come. Ethan, no. This isn't my fight. You keep saying that, but you're wrong. He cupped her face in his hands. It became my fight the moment I saw you in that saloon, standing tall despite being afraid. It became my fight every morning by the river. Every word we shared. Every silence that said more than words could. Pretty speeches won't stop bullets. No, but they might convince you to trust me. He stood, pulling her to her feet. Come on, we need to get a fire going before you catch your death. He busied himself with kindling and matches from his saddlebags, coaxing a small flame to life in the cold fireplace. The warmth was meager, but welcome. Mary Louise moved closer to it, still wrapped in her blanket. They'll track us here, she said quietly. I'm counting on it. She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean, I'm tired of running. Tired of letting men like Benson think they own the world. Maybe it's time someone reminded them they don't. You can't fight them all. Don't intend to fight them all, just Benson. See, I've been asking around. Seems our good sheriff has quite the arrangement. Protection money from the saloons, skimming from the town treasury. Even running goods through that were meant for the Indian reservation. Ethan fed another stick to the fire. Man like that, he's made enemies. They just need someone to rally around. And you think you're that someone. No, but you are. Mary Louise stared at him. Me, I'm nobody. The preacher's daughter who takes in washing? You're the woman who stood up to Hawkins, who's kept your dignity despite the town's worst efforts, who represents everything Benson's corruption stands against. He moved to sit beside her. Your father was respected, even if people were too cowardly to support him openly. They'll support you. Even if that were true, what difference would it make Benson has the guns? The authority only works if people recognize it, and guns. He shrugged. I've got some experience with those. Thunder crashed overhead, making Mary Louise jump. Ethan put his arm around her, pulling her close. She resisted for a moment, then melted against him. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. Means you're not stupid. He pressed his lips to her hair. But I need you to be brave too. Can you do that? I don't know. I've been trying to be brave my whole life, and look where it's gotten me. It's gotten you here, with me, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. She lifted her head to look at him. You can't promise that. Watch me. Something shifted in her expression, fear giving way to determination. All right, what do you need me to do? Before he could answer, the sound of horses reached them through the storm. Multiple riders, moving fast despite the conditions. Ethan stood, checking his gun again. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, stay down and stay quiet. Ethan, promise me? She nodded reluctantly. He positioned himself between her and the door, waiting. The horses stopped outside. Boots squelched in mud. Then Benson's voice, loud and falsely jovial. Cole, I know you're in there. Come on out, and we'll discuss this like civilized men. Nothing civilized about you, Sheriff, Ethan called back. Now that's hurtful. Here I am, trying to retrieve stolen property and arrest a fugitive. And you're interfering with the law. Your law, maybe, not justice. Same thing in my town. The joviality dropped from Benson's voice. Last chance, Cole. Send the girl out, right away, and this ends peaceful. Ethan glanced back at Mary Louise. She sat straight-backed, chin raised, every inch her father's daughter. What do you say? Miss Walker want to go with the sheriff? I'd rather die, she said clearly, loud enough to carry outside. You hear that? Benson lady's made her choice. Then you've made yours. The first shot shattered the window, showering them with glass. Ethan shoved Mary Louise down. Returning fire through the opening, more shots followed, splintering wood and whistling through the air. "Circle around," Benson shouted. "Cut them off from the back." Ethan counted muzzle flashes. 5, maybe 6 men. Not impossible odds, but not favorable either, especially not with Mary Louise to protect. He reloaded quickly, mind racing. Then Mary Louise tugged at his sleeve. "The root cellar," she whispered. "Father showed me. There's a tunnel that leads to the riverbank, from the old mining days." Ethan grinned fiercely. "Have I mentioned you're remarkable?" Even terrified, she managed a small smile. "You might have said something." Another volley of shots. Ethan returned fire, driving the attackers back temporarily. "Show me! Quick!" They scrambled to the corner where a worn rug covered wooden planks. Beneath was a ladder leading into darkness. Ethan went first, testing each rung, then helped Mary Louise down. The tunnel was narrow, barely tall enough to stand upright, but it led away from the cabin. Behind them, they heard boots on floorboards. "They're gone. Find them." Ethan grabbed Mary Louise's hand, and they ran through the darkness. Guided more by instinct than sight, the tunnel seemed endless, each step taking them further from danger but also deeper into the unknown. Finally, blessed air touched their faces. They emerged on a ledge above the river, rain still pounding down. Below, the water raged, swollen with runoff. "Now what?" Mary Louise gasped. Ethan looked back, hearing shouts as their escape route was discovered. Then downstream, where the river curved. If they could make it around that bend, they'd be out of sight. From there. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Then hold on tight and don't let go." He pulled her against him and jumped. The cold water hit like 1,000 needles, driving the breath from their lungs. The current caught them immediately, spinning them like leaves in a tempest. Ethan kept one arm locked around Mary Louise, using the other to try to guide their path as they hurtled downstream. A rock loomed out of the darkness. He twisted, taking the impact on his shoulder rather than letting it strike her. Pain exploded through his body, but he held on. Mary Louise's fingers dug into his shirt, her face pressed against his chest. The river swept them around the bend, out of sight of their pursuers. Ethan spotted a fallen tree extending into the water and grabbed for it. His fingers found purchase on a branch, nearly wrenching his arm from its socket as their momentum stopped abruptly. "Can you climb?" he shouted over the roar of water. She nodded, teeth chattering. Together they pulled themselves along the tree to the bank, collapsing in the mud. For a moment they lay there, gasping, the rain still pounding down. "We need to move," Ethan said, struggling to his feet. His shoulders screamed protest, but he ignored it. "They'll figure out what we did soon enough." Mary Louise stood, her dress plastered to her body, hair streaming water. In the lightning flashes, he could see her lips were blue with cold. Without thinking, he pulled off his coat wet as it was and wrapped it around her. "You'll freeze," she protested. "I'll manage. Come on." They stumbled through the darkness, following the river downstream. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound might be pursuit. But the storm was their ally now, covering their tracks, muffling any noise they made. After what felt like hours, Ethan spotted what he was looking for, a cluster of rocks forming a shallow cave, barely visible from the trail. He guided Mary Louise inside, both of them collapsing against the stone wall. "We can rest here a bit," he said, trying to control his shivering. "Storm should break by dawn." Mary Louise huddled against him, seeking warmth. "What happens at dawn?" "We go back." "Back?" She pulled away to stare at him. "They'll kill you." "Maybe, but running only delays the inevitable. Benson won't stop hunting us. And even if we got away clean, what kind of life would that be, always looking over our shoulders? Always afraid. Better than dead. Is it? He caught her hands in his. Mary Louise, I've been running most of my life. From things I've done. Things I should have done. Things I was afraid to do. And all it's brought me is empty nights and emptier days. So you want to die heroically, is that it? I want to live. Really live. And I can't do that if I let men like Benson drive us out. He touched her face gently. You said your father believed everyone could be saved. Maybe he was right. Maybe even this town can be saved. My father died believing that. He died standing for something. That's more than most manage. Ethan shifted, wincing as his shoulder protested. Besides, I've got something he didn't. What's that? A reputation with a gun, and someone worth fighting for. Mary Louise was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. If we go back, we do it together. No heroic last stands. No sending me away for my own good. Together or not at all. That's not negotiable. She finished. You asked me to trust you. Now I'm asking the same. Trust that I know my own mind. Trust that I can make my own choices. He studied her face in the dim light. All right, together. She sealed the promise by kissing him. It was nothing like the romantic moments in the novels she'd hidden under her bed as a girl. His lips were cold, tasting of river water and danger. She was shivering, exhausted, terrified. But when his arms came around her, when he deepened the kiss with a sound like surrender, she felt more alive than she had in years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw wonder in his eyes. Mary Louise Walker, he said roughly, you are going to be the death of me. Not if I can help it. She settled against him again, sharing warmth. Tell me your plan. Still working on that part. Despite everything, she laughed. Wonderful. We're going to face down a corrupt sheriff and his men with no plan. I've got the beginnings of one. Benson's weakness is his greed. The protection money. The skimming he can't have kept that secret from everyone. There must be others who know, who've suffered because of it. Some. Mr. Henley at the general store, Mary Louise said slowly. He's been paying Benson for years, and Doc Randolph, he knows about the medical supplies that were supposed to go to the reservation but ended up sold to travelers. Would they testify? If they thought Benson's power was broken? Maybe, but not before. They have families to think of. Then we need to break his power first. Ethan stared out at the storm. In the morning, I'll ride in alone. Together, remember. Hear me out. I'll call Benson out. Make a big show of it. While everyone's watching me, you slip into town another way. Talk to Henley, Randolph, anyone else who might stand with us. When Benson and I face off, they need to be ready. And if Benson just shoots you down? Then at least I'll have distracted him long enough for you to get away. She hit him, not gently. That's exactly the kind of heroic nonsense I said no to. It's not heroic, it's practical. Benson wants a public show, wants everyone to see what happens to those who defy him. He'll grandstand, make speeches. That gives us time. Us, she repeated. Not you, us. They argued quietly as the storm gradually spent itself, plans forming and reforming. By the time the first gray light touched the sky, they had something resembling a strategy. Not a good one, perhaps, but better than nothing. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and gleaming. They emerged from their shelter stiff and cold, but determined. The walk back to where Ethan had left Duchess took an hour. The mare waited patiently, having found shelter under an overhang. Good girl, Ethan murmured, stroking her neck. He turned to Mary Louise. You sure about this? No, but I'm sure about you. She gripped his hand. And I'm sure I'd rather die fighting beside you than live hiding from shadows. They mounted together, Mary Louise behind him with her arms around his waist. As they rode toward town, the sun broke through the remaining clouds, painting the wet landscape in shades of gold and green. "Whatever happens," Ethan said, "I want you to know something. These past weeks, meeting you, talking with you by the river, it's the closest I've felt to peace in years. Maybe ever." "Don't," she said against his back. "Don't talk like you're saying goodbye." "Not goodbye, just thank you." She held him tighter. "Save the speeches for Benson. You're going to need them." The town appeared before them, smoke rising from chimneys as people began their day. Somewhere in that cluster of buildings, Sheriff Benson waited with his men. The smart thing would be to keep riding, to find another town, another life. But Ethan was tired of doing the smart thing, and Mary Louise deserved better than a life built on fear. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said. "Let's do it anyway." They rode down Main Street as the church bell began to toll, calling the faithful to Sunday service. But today, Ethan thought, they'd get a different kind of sermon, one written in courage and consequence, with justice as its text. Sheriff Carl Benson wanted a show. He was about to get one. The shot rang out before they reached the center of town. Ethan felt the bullet whistle past his ear, close enough to stir his hair. He pulled Duchess up short, shielding Mary Louise with his body as he scanned the rooftops. "That's far enough." "Cole." Sheriff Benson emerged from the jailhouse, flanked by 6 armed men. His clothes were mud-stained from the night's chase, his face haggard but triumphant. "Step down slow. Hands where we can see them." "Stay on the horse," Ethan murmured to Mary Louise as he dismounted. "If this goes bad—" "It won't." Her voice was steady despite everything. Ethan kept his hands visible but relaxed, projecting calm he didn't feel. People were emerging from buildings, drawn by the gunshot. Good. The more witnesses, the better. "Quite the welcome committee, Sheriff," Ethan said loud enough to carry. "All this for one man and a woman, I'm flattered. You're under arrest for aiding a fugitive and attempted murder of a peace officer." Benson's smile was cold. "Miss Walker is wanted for theft and moral corruption. Come quietly, and maybe you'll live to see trial." "Funny thing about trials," Ethan said conversationally. "They require evidence, witnesses, truth. You sure you want all that aired in public?" A murmur ran through the growing crowd. Benson's eyes narrowed. "You threatening me, boy?" "Just observing. For instance, I'm observing that Mr. Henley there looks mighty interested in what you might say about theft." Ethan nodded toward the store owner, who had appeared in his doorway. "Considering how much protection money he's paid you over the years." Henley paled but didn't retreat. Other faces appeared: Doc Randolph, Mrs. Fletcher, even old Samuel from the livery. The town was watching. "Lies." Benson spat. "This man's a drifter, a killer. You going to take his word over mine?" "My word's not the one that matters." Ethan said. He raised his voice further. "How about it, folks? Any of you tired of paying the sheriff's special taxes, tired of shipments going missing? Medical supplies meant for the reservation ending up sold to the highest bidder?" "Shut your mouth." Benson's hand dropped to his gun. "The truth bothers you that much." Ethan took a step forward. "Or is it that Mary Louise turned you down, big man like you? Couldn't handle a woman saying no, had to trump up charges, run her out of town?" "She's a thief and worse. She's a minister's daughter who takes in washing." The words cracked like a whip. "Her only crime was refusing to warm your bed, and everyone here knows it." The crowd stirred restlessly. Some of Benson's men exchanged uncertain glances. The sheriff's face had gone dark red. "Enough talk," he snarled. "Take them." His men started forward, but Mary Louise's voice stopped them cold. "I have something to say." She slid from the horse, standing straight despite her muddy, torn dress. Every eye turned to her as she walked forward, placing herself beside Ethan. "My father believed in this town," she said, her clear voice carrying to every listener. "He believed you were good people led astray. Even when you turned your backs on him, even when you let corruption flourish because it was easier than fighting it, he believed. Your father was a fool, Benson sneered. My father was the only honest man in this town. The words rang with passion. And you hated him for it, just like you hate anyone who won't bow to your greed. She turned to the crowd. I know you're afraid. I've been afraid too, but look what fear has brought us a sheriff who steals more than any outlaw, who threatens women, who sells supplies meant for starving people. Is this the town you want? Is this the legacy you want to leave your children? Pretty words won't save you, Benson said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Maybe not, but they might save this town. Mary Louise lifted her chin. I'm not a thief. I've never taken anything that wasn't mine, but I'll confess to one crime. I chose to trust this man beside me over the corrupt sheriff who's supposed to protect us. If that's moral corruption, then I'm guilty. You heard her, Benson shouted. She admits her guilt now. Oh, shut up, Carl? The new voice made everyone turn. Mrs. Huggins, the banker's sister-in-law and chief gossip, stepped out of the crowd. She looked older in the morning light, tired. Martha Benson sounded stunned. What are you doing? Something I should have done years ago, standing up. She addressed the crowd. I've held my tongue because my family profited from the sheriff's schemes, but I watched this girl nurse her father through his final illness, watched her work herself to the bone to survive honestly, watched her maintain her dignity while we whispered behind her back. I'm done being part of the problem. You don't know what you're saying, Benson warned. I know exactly what I'm saying. I know about the protection money, the skimmed taxes, the bribes. My brother-in-law kept records. Carl, every penny. The sheriff's face went white. You're lying. Am I? Should we go to the bank right now, open those books? A long moment of silence stretched taut. Then Henley stepped forward. I'll testify. About the protection money, about the threats. So will I, Doc Randolph added. About the medical supplies. One by one, others stepped forward. Not everyone fear still held many back, but enough. Enough to show the tide turning. Benson's hand went to his gun. You're all making a mistake. I'm the law here. No, Ethan said quietly. You're just a man with a badge, and badges can be taken away. Not by you, Benson drew, but Ethan was already moving. The shot was impossibly fast, trained reflex taking over. Benson's gun flew from his hand, his cry of pain sharp in the morning air. He clutched his bleeding fingers, staring at Ethan in shock. Anyone else? Ethan asked mildly, his Colt steady. I'm hoping not. Had enough killing for one lifetime. Benson's men looked at each other, then slowly raised their hands. Hawkins was among them, his earlier bravado nowhere to be seen. It's over, Benson, Mary Louise said. You've lost? This isn't... You can't... The sheriff seemed to shrink, his authority evaporating like morning mist. We can and we will. Mrs. Huggins turned to the crowd. I say we hold a proper election. Get ourselves a real sheriff, one who serves the town instead of bleeding it dry. Agreement rippled through the gathered townspeople. Someone mentioned fetching the circuit judge. Others talked about reviewing the town charter. For the first time in years, Redemption Creek buzzed with hope instead of fear. Through it all, Ethan kept his gun trained on Benson and his men, watchful for any last desperate play. But the fight had gone out of them. They stood dejected as townsmen collected their weapons, as plans were made to lock them up until proper justice could be arranged. Only when the last of them was secured did Ethan holster his weapon. The adrenaline drained away, leaving him suddenly exhausted. His shoulder throbbed where he'd hit the rock, and dozens of smaller pains made themselves known. Ethan Mary Louise touched his arm, concern in her eyes. You're hurt. I'm fine. But he swayed slightly, and she slipped under his arm to support him. Doc Randolph, she called. When you're done there, I need you. I said I'm fine. Ethan protested. And I said we'd do this together. That includes letting me take care of you when you need it. Her voice softened. You've been taking care of everyone else. Let someone return the favor. They made their way to Doc Randolph's office, the crowd parting respectfully. Some nodded. Some murmured thanks. Some just watched with wondering eyes. The drifter and the preacher's daughter had done what no one thought possible. They'd stood up to corruption and won. But as Mary Louise helped him onto the doctor's examining table, Ethan knew the real victory wasn't over Benson. It was in the choice to stand and fight instead of run. In the courage of ordinary people to finally say, enough. In the woman beside him who'd found strength she didn't know she had. Thank you, he said quietly as Doc Randolph began examining his shoulder. For what? Mary Louise asked. For reminding me what I was fighting for, not just against Benson, but for something better. She took his hand, careful of the scraped knuckles. That's what my father always said. You can't just fight against evil, you have to fight for good. Smart man, your father. Yes, she said softly. He was. Outside, they could hear the town coming alive in a new way. Voices raised in discussion instead of fear. Plans being made for a better future. It wouldn't be easy, years of corruption couldn't be swept away in a morning. But a start had been made. What happens now? Mary Louise asked. Ethan squeezed her hand. Now we see what kind of town Redemption Creek wants to become, and whether there's a place in it for a reformed gunfighter and a preacher's daughter. Together, she asked, echoing their promise from the night before. Together, he confirmed. Doc Randolph cleared his throat. If you two are done making eyes at each other, I need to set this shoulder. And, young lady, you should let me look at those cuts on your hands. They laughed, tension finally breaking. Outside, church bells began to ring, not for service this time, but in celebration. Redemption Creek had lived up to its name at last. The preacher's daughter and the gunfighter had found their redemption, and in finding it, they'd helped a town find its soul. 2 weeks had passed since Sheriff Benson's fall. The circuit judge had come and gone, taking Benson and his worst accomplices with him to face trial in Denver. The town had elected Tom Morrison, the saloon owner's younger brother and a former cavalry officer, as the new sheriff. He was a fair man who believed in law, not profit. But not all of Redemption Creek welcomed the changes. Ethan stood in the small cabin he'd built on the edge of town, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. His shoulder had healed, though it still ached on cold mornings. Through the window, he could see Mary Louise tending the small garden they'd planted together, even in her simple calico dress, with dirt on her hands and wisps of hair escaping her bonnet. She took his breath away. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Tom Morrison stood on the porch, his new badge gleaming but his face troubled. Morning, Sheriff. Ethan greeted him. Coffee. Thanks, but this isn't a social call. Tom glanced toward Mary Louise. Some of the town council members have been talking. They're concerned. About what? Though Ethan could guess. About you two, living out here together, unmarried. They say it's improper, sets a bad example. Mary Louise had come to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. We've done nothing wrong, Tom. I know that, but perception matters to these folks. Mrs. Elmsworth and Reverend Caldwell are leading the charge. They say just because Benson's gone doesn't mean the town should abandon all moral standards. Moral standards. Mary Louise laughed bitterly. Where were their moral standards when Benson was robbing everyone blind? I'm just warning you, Tom said uncomfortably. They're planning to bring it before the full council next week. Could make things difficult for you both. After he left, Ethan found Mary Louise in the garden, attacking weeds with unusual vigor. We could leave, he said quietly. Start fresh somewhere else. She spun to face him. Is that what you want to run again? I want you to be happy. not fighting the same battles over and over. Life is fighting battles. Ethan, the question is, which ones are worth it? She stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. This is my home, our home. I won't let small-minded gossips drive us away. That evening, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. It was during these quiet hours that they'd slowly shared their stories, his guilt over a deputy killed in Abilene because of his hesitation, her mother's death and the loneliness that followed, dreams deferred and paths not taken. "My father would have liked you," Mary Louise said suddenly. A gunfighter. A man who chooses conscience over convenience, who protects those who need protecting. She moved closer to him on the small sofa they'd bought from a traveling merchant. He would have seen past the gun to the heart. "And what does the heart tell you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "That I love you. That I've loved you since that morning by the river when you retrieved Mrs. Morrison's sheet, maybe even before." The words hung in the air like a blessing. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and lavender soap. "I love you too," he said against her hair. "More than I thought possible. Which is why—" He pulled back to look at her. "Mary Louise Walker, will you marry me?" Her eyes went wide. "Ethan? I know it's not much of a proposal, no ring yet, no fancy words, but I want to do this right. Make you my wife before God and man. Give those gossips one less thing to whisper about. You don't have to marry me to quiet gossips. I'm marrying you because I can't imagine a future without you in it. Because you make me want to be better than I am. Because—" She silenced him with a kiss. When they parted, both were breathless. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding took place 3 days later, a simple ceremony in the church where her father had once preached. Tom Morrison stood as Ethan's witness, while Mrs. Fletcher, won over by their courage, stood with Mary Louise. Even Mrs. Huggins attended, having become an unlikely ally. Reverend Caldwell performed the ceremony with visible reluctance, but Mary Louise had insisted on using her father's church. As they exchanged vows, Ethan saw tears in her eyes, joy mixed with sorrow that her father wasn't there to see it. Afterward, they hosted a small reception at their cabin. The crowd was modest but genuine, those who'd stood with them against Benson, who saw beyond reputation to character. As the sun set, their guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone. They stood on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "No regrets?" Ethan asked. "None. Only that I didn't find you sooner." They were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Ethan tensed, hand moving toward the gun he still wore, but relaxed when he saw it was Doc Randolph's buggy. The doctor climbed down, looking pleased with himself. "Wedding present," he announced, producing an envelope, collected from some grateful citizens who wanted to remain anonymous. Inside was a deed to 20 acres of good bottomland, perfect for farming, and a note. "For the couple who showed us courage, build something beautiful." Mary Louise pressed her hand to her mouth. "Who would do this?" "Does it matter?" Doc smiled. "This town owes you both more than land. You gave us back our backbone." After he left, they walked their new property in the moonlight. The land stretched along the river where they'd first truly met, rich soil waiting for seeds and dreams. "We could build a real house," Mary Louise said. "Maybe raise horses, or cattle." "Or children," Ethan added softly. She looked at him with shining eyes. "Or children." They stood at the river's edge, the water murmuring its eternal song. Here where it all began. They could see their future spreading before them like the prairie vast, challenging but full of promise. "My father used to say that redemption wasn't a destination, but a journey," Mary Louise said, "that we had to choose it again every day." "Smart man," Ethan replied, as he always did. "But this time," he added, "I choose you, every day, for whatever days we have." "And I choose you," The gunfighter who became a farmer. The runner who learned to stand. The man who showed me that love was worth any risk. In the distance, a coyote called to the moon. The river flowed on, constant in its change, and on its banks. Two people who'd found each other against all odds began the long, sweet work of building a life together. Months later, the town of Redemption Creek had settled into its new rhythm. The corruption was gone, replaced by honest governance. The saloon still did good business, but the church was fuller too. And at the edge of town, where the river bent toward the mountains, smoke rose from the chimney of a well-built house. Inside, Mary Louise Cole stirred a pot of stew while her husband mended harness at the table. Her movements were careful. She carried precious cargo now, the promise of new life that would arrive with the spring flowers. "Another letter from Denver," Ethan said, holding up an envelope. "Seems word of our little revolution has spread. They want me to consider a deputy marshal position." "And?" Mary Louise asked, though she already knew the answer. "Told them I'm retired. Got everything I need right here." She smiled, one hand resting on the slight swell beneath her apron. "No more running. No more running. This is home." Outside, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The river sang its ancient song, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, church bells rang not in alarm or celebration this time, but simply marking the end of another day in a town that had found its soul. Ethan rose and wrapped his arms around his wife, feeling the miracle of their child between them. They'd started as strangers thrown together by violence and need. They'd become partners in justice, then lovers, then something more, two halves of a whole, stronger together than apart. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For catching me, when I didn't even know I was falling." She turned in his arms, eyes bright with tears and laughter. "Always, forever, no matter what comes." And in the house by the river, built on land given in gratitude, filled with love hard-won and freely given, Ethan Cole finally understood what redemption meant. It wasn't about forgetting the past or even forgiving it. It was about choosing to be better, to build something good from the ashes of what was. He'd been a gunfighter, a runner, a man haunted by his failures. But here, now, he was simply a husband, soon to be a father, part of a community that had faced its darkness and chosen light. The transformation was complete. The caterpillar had become a butterfly. And if sometimes he still felt the weight of the gun on his hip, remembered the faces of men he'd killed well, that was part of the journey too. The past shaped but didn't define. The future called but didn't control. There was only now. This moment, this woman in his arms, this life they'd built together. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope it touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please leave a comment below, and let's share our thoughts about Ethan and Mary Louise's journey together. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and romance, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories from the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these heartfelt stories. Until next time, partners.